Hello everyone, and thank you all once again for tuning in to Tales by the Fire. In this episode, we will be diving into the Land of Hershel, a medieval fantasy horror story by Raphael Hoffman. A knight's tale of a land filled with madness and eldritch horror. For those who are squeamish or easily frightened, this story may not be for you. But for the rest of you, let us dive in. In the Land of Hershel by Raphael Hoffman. Rough stones and curving trees intermingled in tangled, perplexing walls, forming a circular shelter from the creatures of the night. Branches splayed out, intertwining in the dark between the stars, and created a slight canopy. Grass crept shyly to the edge of the small grove and gave way to soft dirt. In the distance, a strange bird-like shriek echoed out, sounding sad and lonely, as if the animal was the last of its kind. The scene was bathed in the flickering warm light of a campfire, a safe haven from the dark cold that surrounded it. Spread around the fire, lounging against moss-covered logs, sitting on stones and reclining on travel mats, were a group of 5 men. Each man wore armor that had once been reflective and praiseworthy, but was now dull with wear and age. They each sported a weapon strapped to their side, the closest companion they would ever know or trust. One man, who had armor a little tight around his waist and a slight pink flush to his cheeks, walked to the fire with a metal tray, boasting small loaves of bread and cheese.
"Hey, Timon, how long are you gonna put these victuals next to the fire? I like my cheese with a little bite to it, you know. Not soft and runny like Red's trouser bottoms."
A sharp-faced man by the name of Piscus called out. His twin, Mattis, laughed uproaringly as young Red, still looking too young to be a knight, tossed a stone at Piscus, annoyed by the comment. The overweight, kind-faced Timon set down the tray near the flames and gave a small smile. Soft-spoken and pleasant, the knight was patient with the remark.
"I'll leave you to remove the tray when you feel it's ready, Piscus. I'll not sully your supper."
The sharp-faced knight nodded in agreement and settled back against the dark log he rested on.
"You say my trousers are soft and runny, yet you still haven't gotten over your little cold you've harbored since the last fortnight,"
young Knight Red retorted, chin sticking out. Piscus snorted and spit, rolling his eyes.
"Soft and runny will be your pants when next you charge into battle. Pissing yourself in terror."
His twin, Mattis, with a face just as pointy, snickered and pulled out a knife, carving into a soft piece of wood he had collected earlier that day.
"Call me a coward, will you?"
Red exclaimed, brow furrowed.
"I'll let you know the tale of how I was called forth to be a companion of this miserable group."
The young fighter sat up from his mat, spry frame limber and full of energy, ready to share his story. Kind Timon raised his hand to stop him.
"Elric presides over this fire, young master. Do not haste into your action quite yet."
The twins, young Red, and soft-spoken Timon all looked to the one knight who had sat silent since the moon had peeked over the horizon. The elder man, resting his sore muscles on a flat stone, shifted his look from the fire up to his companions. He was an imposing, fit figure for an aging war veteran, and still sparked the air of command and authority. Others stayed quiet when he opened his mouth. He had been called Elric the Invincible in his younger days. Elric blinked once, then nodded to Knight Red.
You may tell your tale. Thank ye, Timon, for maintaining military order at our evening respite.
Young Red gave a smug smile, now knowing he was the center of attention.
It began at Kappa Town in November.
Ah, Kappa Town. I knew there was a smell o' tar on him.
Piscus snortled, interrupting without care.
Quiet, you Jiminy!
Red spoke out in anger.
I haven't even started yet you see fit to bother me already?
Piscus rolled his eyes.
Using horoscopes as a retort. My, you are intimidating.
He turned to his twin.
Mattis, you think Reddy has a horoscope? I wager he has a bastard goat as his sign.
Mattis guffawed, and even kind Timon tried hard not to smile. Red's face turned purple, and he stomped a leather boot down into the dirt.
I have half a mind to draw on you, Piscus. Pray to the gods we're on the same side.
Piscus, sporting a large toothy grin, waved his hand dismissively.
Go on, young knight, go on. I jest. Go on.
Red cleared his throat.
In Coppertown, during November, I found myself wandering through the streets alone at night when...
Mattis, I reckon Red here wanders alone quite often. Not a single woman would dare stroll within 10 meters of him. The camp filled with laughter. Even Elric released a chuckle.
I am done. I will not share my story with any of you.
Red stammered, jaw sticking out. He sat back on his mat and crossed his arms. Piscus stood and walked to the fire, wrapping his hands in leather.
Good. I was worried you'd shut my damn ears off.
He grabbed the now hot tray. The bread was well toasted. The crust was dark yellow and gleaming. The cheese had softened, but not fully melted, and teased the nights with the scent of rosemary, oats, and spiced peppers. Piscus took a knife and portioned out the food, distributing the tray around the camp. Well, we can't have the evening silent without a tale, Timon said, accepting his share of the meal. His face was easy to read. He wished his portion had been bigger. The large knight bit down on the hot bread, scalding his tongue. He grimaced for a moment, then he gave a satisfied smile, sitting on the mat. The knight looked over at Elric. Will you tell us a story, sir? The other knight watched Elric, expectant eager eyes full of respect. The older man licked his lips and grabbed a wineskin made from the bladder of a winter-roan elk. He took a swig of cold water and stared at each of his men. They were rowdy, but loyal. He knew a story to tell them. His mind had been fixed on the memory of a dangerous quest. But why had it been so difficult for him to remember? Had old age finally caught up with him? It took a moment for the thought to distill clearly. When it had, he looked about the grove. The night was still young, the fire warm, the food delicious, and the water fresh. A good night to spin yarn. I shall, said Elric, much to the delight of his men. Each fidgeted and adjusted, getting comfortable in their positions. Piscus flicked a small pebble at Red, and the young knight bore his teeth. Mattis continued to carve, eyes fixated on Elric's face. Timon licked a finger and dabbed at a crumb on the metal tray, putting it in his mouth. He made a sucking sound. Elric cleared his throat. What are the traits of a true knight? The men were quiet, refraining from answering. They would rather hear it from the senior knight. Bravery and pride, of course. At least those are the first that come to the minds of the common. But there are other traits as well that are just as important. Virtue, self-restraint, for example, skill, determination, stubbornness, and sheer grit. But the most important trait, obedience to an order, however blind it may be. It's that lack of questioning and blindness that keeps a knight moving forward when all others would falter. Now, I ask, is that a good thing? None of the knights answered, each frowning at what Elric had said. The older knight continued. This is neither the beginning of the story nor the end, for no story truly has a beginning or an end. Every account told is never finished. I ponder the meaning of the story, wonder at the facts left unanswered, question everything. Very unknightly. Unfortunately, too late. Elric tore at a piece of bread, each knight in the grove hanging on his every word. They waited as he chewed, then swallowed his morsel. It was a hot summer. I found myself in the company of a score of soldiers standing on the edge of what looked to me as the most dangerous terrain one could conceive. Hundreds of kilometers of swampland, maybe thousands, stretched on in front of us as far as the eye could see. But this was no ordinary swamp. Strange waters mixed with what we first had assumed was mud and covered everything. Sparse willows dotted the area here and there, each spread far, as if they would not survive within 100 feet from their next kin member. Moss the color of light mud floated in large, dense patches throughout the land, with bulbous yellow pustules growing from them like stunted fruit. Tiny flies swarmed in small clouds so thick they could clog a man's lungs. What seemed like quick flicks from black tentacles would disturb the surface for 1 second, then be gone, as if never there. The stench was that of wet clay and decay.
Sir,
Interrupted Piscus.
none of us have ever heard of such a place. What a terrible wonder it must have been.
Ah, 'twas the land of Hershel, Piscus, a forbidden land, Elric explained.
Forgive my intrusion, but you mentioned that the waters were strange in the swamp.
Elric thought for a moment, mind trying to recollect the story. Ah, yes, the waters were strange. To be true, it was not water that made the swamp, but some form of a cursed liquid prison. The score of men, including myself, were in search of an ancient ruin that had been rumored to exist in the heart of the evil land. No one had traversed the terrain in thousands of years, so none of us knew what fate would befall us. Alas, our folly. The first one of us to step into the swamp was also the first one of us to die. The knights around the camp sat up, eyebrows raised. Elric continued. He was an eager knight, foolish and thoughtless. The man took a step forward, and his foot connected with the top of the milky waters as if he stood on a rock. It didn't splash down. It didn't get wet. To the amazement of myself and my company. The man took another step forward, and then another, walking across the top of the liquid. We were astonished. It was as if the man had been bestowed a gift from the gods. Imagine, walking on what looked like water yet felt like land. The man turned, stopping his movement. Tonnage loosened up to proclaim the miracle, and sank to the sound of wet squelches and moist gurgles. Though I imagined his eyes growing wide at the last minute, I doubted it to be so. It happened too fast. One moment he stood atop the swamp, and then the next he had sunk beneath the surface, never to rise up again.
How can that be?
Young Red exclaimed with horrified wonder. Elric grabbed a slice of softened cheese and put it on a piece of bread. He ate, not even tasting the meal as if it were non-existent, then continued. I wanted it myself. I took a step forward, kneeling in front of the swamp water. Grabbing at the thick brown substance was impossible. It was as if my fingers hit solid stone. Only when I rested my hand on the surface and did nothing more, did my hand suddenly suction forward. It was as if shades from beyond the abyss had grabbed my appendage. My entire arm was yanked forward by the strength of the swamp, wet, squelching, and sucking, and in terror. I cried out, believing I would surely drown in the solid liquid. I was only saved because the entire company of men grabbed at me, and using all their force, pulled my arm out. It took the strength of nearly 20 men to pull me from that cursed swamp. As I flailed about in panic, grabbing at all and nothing. Nearly 20 men. Had there been but one man less, I doubt I would be telling this tale now. In fact, my arm had dislocated from the shoulder down in the violent pull to save my life. Quite painful it was. It was reset by one partitioner we had at our disposal, a man I held close to my heart. Red stood, head shaking in amazement.
How have we not heard of this place? Did any of you even continue forward on your quest?
How could he? Piscus said in annoyance, tossing another pebble at the young knight.
They all would have died trying.
Indeed, we continued forward, Elric stated with a nod, again trying to search his brain for what happened next in the tale. Why was the story difficult to recall? And you haven't heard of this place, young Red, because the land is a forbidden secret. Now, settle and listen. Red sat back down on the mat, humbled. We were obedient knights, Elric continued. We were on a holy quest and would never give in when we faced but the first challenge. All we needed was to bolster our courage. The company sat, waving away at the fly swarms, and we spent the rest of the day discussing how we would move on. It finally came down to one possible solution. We would have to move forward without stopping or without respite, until we reached the ruin we'd sought. To stop or rest would mean death by drowning in the thick, viscous liquid. We all knew our limitation. Knew how far we could go before collapse. 6 of us decided to wait at the edge of the swampland and hoped the rest would reach our goal in return. I was in the group that decided I was fit enough to go. In addition, I felt as if it was but a logic problem. We had but only to walk, not run, to maintain footing upon the surface of the swamp. And if walking was all it took, I felt confident I could last at least 100 kilometers if need be. The rest of the men that would go with me felt the same confidence, so off we went. The 4 knights licked their lips and stared at each other, firelight flickering in their faces. The sound of a bird cry, the same sound from earlier, echoed out. Elric cleared his throat. Ah, in the Land of Hershel. We moved in a line, shoulder to shoulder, as we trudged forward. Our hearts hammered quickly at first, but soon relaxed to the regularity of our pace. We each made sure to keep our footfalls heavy, so as not to risk sinking. The swamp was as dangerous as it was intriguing. How could we walk across the top, yet see hints of slithering beasts swimming about, as if they were in but water? Only in this place, in the Land of Hershel. Shoulder to shoulder we went, not stopping for drink, food, or breath. If a man had to relieve himself, well, 'twas best to do so while moving, lest he die with his pants around his ankles. The men around the fire chuckled at Elric's remark. "Don't laugh, my friends," Elric warned, "because that is exactly how we lost our second man." We had marched forward for maybe an hour, only when to my left, a few men down our line, one soldier proclaimed he needed to, for lack of a better term, shit. The rest of us told him he absolutely could not stop moving, and if he really had to go, he was going to go while walking. He complained, obviously, and we teased him all the more for it. Eventually he could not hold it any more, and passing his gear to a companion, unbuckled his pants and lowered his trousers. It was quick. The incident, that is. The trousers hung around his ankles, and he tripped forward, his hand slamming into solid liquid, not yet sinking due to the movement. He froze, knowing all too late what was to befall him. The rest of us couldn't even slow our pace to help. He screamed out once, a protest of indignity and fear echoing alongside the squelching and sucking before silence met our ears. I couldn't even turn around without fear of tripping or facing the same fate. A horrible way to go. From the score of men that had arrived in the Land of Hershel, one had died right away, 6 remained behind, and another was then lost. Counting myself, that left 12 men to trudge across the liquid-solid swamp.
What a way to die,
Piscus said more to himself. Timon and Mattis both looked pale. Red swallowed visibly. Elric nodded gravely. In the Land of Hershel, there was no mercy for any man. In fact, in the Land of Hershel, all we were to expect was death. We walked on. Hour after hour, our feet landed in the surface of the liquid and bounced back up as our noses were met with the pungent smell of decay. Near the shore of the swamp where we had begun, there were many willow trees, but the further we went, the less of them we saw. It gave the sense that we were heading deeper into the land of death, a place where nothing grew, and shadows whispered from the dark. What made it most difficult was the mental strain the land had over us. Stop and die, trip and die, hesitate and die. Every second and every movement could be death. The men tried to sing a marching tune, but it was like the air stole our voices away from us. Our sounds were carried away and suppressed. Instead, the swamp replaced music with a cacophony of strange animal noises that had no origin. Shrieks from afar, what sounded like a child's cry right behind you. So faint you couldn't tell if it was imagination or reality. And the wet, sliding sounds of the occasional black tentacle that would appear above the surface. All day we heard that. The sounds pierced into your very head and lodged themselves there, mixing and swirling without end, like dancing demons chanting right around a corner. Enough to drive a man mad. Louder and louder it got the further from the shore we walked. We had not even heard the noise at the start of our journey. Elric shuffled in place as the 4 knights sat in quiet wonder at the story painted for them. Night befell us. But fortunately, by then we had found an outcropping of rock jutting from the solid liquid like a stone's sanctuary. The dozen men, counting myself, did not hesitate to take advantage of the stable platform, climbing and sitting, adjusting ourselves comfortably to rest our feet. It was bliss after a full day of walking. Even though the swarms of flies thickened around our sweaty necks, we were all sore, tired, and well deserving of the break. We each made small talk, I with the partitioner. The swamp was the only topic that parted from our lips. The sun disappeared and the moon came out, shining its soft blue glow across the landscape and making the swamp feel even more formidable. The noises only grew in intensity. We began to question ourselves on whether we should continue or head back. There was no sign of the ruins, and judging by the layout of the land, we would no longer see any trees or rocks soon. One day walking back the way we came and we would be safe once more, free from the manic grasp of the Land of Hershel. It was quite the debate, heated even. In the end, two decided that when first light appeared, they would head back. One decided to stay on the rocks, wait it out and see the fate of either party. And 8 others decided to continue. My friend the partitioner was one of them. Cold morning came and we rose, feeling ill-rested and with muscles knotted. We separated our own ways. Less than half of the men that had started the quest now continued onward. Soon there would be even less.
How many of you died out there in that hellish swamp?
Piscus asked with furrowed brow. I cannot spoil that quite yet, Elric responded. Now, let me continue. Piscus nodded, and the fire gave a pop as the log settled. Our feet were weary, and our legs were sore. We had all done our share of marching in the past, but yet it was as if each hour spent trotting across the swamp equaled to 3 days of quick time with a strict general. As we moved on into our second day of the journey, one of the soldiers grew a leg cramp. I could sympathize with his suffering. My feet, wrapped tightly in their boots, felt raw and chafed. Each step made my thighs quiver and my knees complain with dull ache. The skin on the bottom of my heels rubbed over and over on rubber, growing hot with irritation. How had our physique degraded so quickly? We were all trained knights. It was the swamp. The composition of the landscape, or something. The soldier with the leg cramp hobbled on for as long as he could, eyes burning with furious pain. He kept his teeth clenched. I remember. He mumbled that he wouldn't die. His words were hollow and without meaning. We winced alongside him with each step we took, understanding his pain. Soon enough he was walking hunched over, arms rubbing at the leg while he wobbled forward. The rest of the men could only encourage him on, waving our arms and patting his shoulder. As we neared a willow, he hurried towards it, determined to climb and take a break. But he never made it. Halfway there the pain overtook him, and with a howl he fell backwards onto his buttocks. And the swamp ate him without mercy, slurping him down like a juicy morsel. Hunger and thirst eventually gnawed at our bellies. Our supplies hadn't been intended to last long. A brave man plucked at one of the yellow bulbs growing from the moss and ate it. The moss grew in frequent patches across the surface, and we had seen many of these pustules growing around it. It was like watching someone eat an infected sore. He grimaced in disgust as he bit down. The bitter juice ran down his throat. But nothing happened to him. The rest of us followed his lead, and soon we were munching on our repulsive snacks, feeling their acidic pop on our tongues. One man called these things fungal tripe, and that was what they were from then on. The flesh of the swamp. Quite the name. At least they gave us some form of basic nutrition and liquid to our state of thirst. Night came once more, but this time we were with ill luck. There was no rocks to provide comfort, and we had seen our last 3 hours ago. Moonlight shone for us as we marched, fatigued and fearful. Groans escaped from us, joints grating dully as we wore our cartilage to nothing. Blisters on our soles burst and bled, moistening our boots. Our minds constantly plagued by the swamp noise, and some of the men had begun to whimper and whisper to themselves. I worried the land would take our sanity before our lives. In the darkened distance, we finally spotted a lone tree, maybe the last willow before the vast plains of the swamp bog. We approached it with almost reverence. It was a haven of safety, a rest from madness, a marker that we were on the edge of the world, the edge of life, the edge of lunacy. Oh, to quit the monotonous movement of our legs. I would have ran teeth bared toward the promised respite. We climbed the tree and sat on the few branches that would support our weight. For all we knew, the tree had stood sentinel there since before the light had been born. About the noises that constantly plagued us, the worst was not knowing where it came from. What created the shrieks, the cries, the whispers, the growling, and almost human voices in the dark of night while trying to pursue some form of rest. It was the noises that kept us awake. One soldier, having been half asleep, sat bolt upright. He yelled out a name, Dalius, I believe the name of his son. He said his son, Dalius, was screaming for help. The rest of us tried to calm him down, to tell him it was just the noises of the swamp, but he would not accept us. He leapt from the tree and ran screaming out his son's name into the dark. His ragged breathing and tangled tongue shouting faded away into nothing, and we were left back with the shrieking and whispering of the land. The worst thing about it, what made us sick to our stomach, was that there had been a lull in the sound as the soldier had cried out, almost as if the swamp itself was listening to the voice, alive, aware, tricking the man into its depths. Both Red and Timon shivered and moved closer to the fire, eyes full of fear. Elric nodded and continued. But the night was not yet over, nor the horrors and mysteries that lay within it. As the hours passed and the noises continued, movement caught our eye. In the blue moonlight that bathed the landscape, we saw them. "Them?" Red whispered. Elric pursed his lips and gave a nod. Them. Shadow form, humanoid creatures with no name. I could only describe them as human-like, but different. Grotesque. They had the torso, neck, and head shape of a human, same size as well. But their limbs, arms and legs were so long, longer than a poleaxe, and taller than two men standing on top of each other. Each limb had to have been 20 feet in length while supporting their regular human body. They moved slowly and meticulously, walking on all fours like beasts. We never saw true definition to them, as they were backlit by the moon. But I remember their glowing eyes. Huge oval orbs, white and ancient like twin moons. We somehow knew they could see us. Even hidden in the willow branches, we were convinced they could see all things. They made no noise and walked deeper into the night. Thankfully, they were far from us and never strayed toward the tree. We each retained a state of uncontrolled terror and a belly filled with the noises of the swamp. One of the soldiers, while half asleep and mumbling to himself, fell from his branch and was lost to us, sucked downward like wet meat guzzled by an undying beast. By the time the sun rose in the morning, there were only 6 of us left. None of us that remained had slept. Sleep was a luxury for the dead. Filled with fear and minds overwhelmed with noise, we climbed down, landing on our torn feet. Without a pause to bemoan our agony, we trudged onward, ripping open scabbed flesh. The sky was light brown and gray, mimicking the swamp colors around us. By the solid liquid, blinded to where the land met sky. Already swallowed up and dead, floating in a state of limbo. Looking upward only brought vertigo, like falling headfirst into a swamp. The land of Hershel had become all that existed. There was no forward, no backward, no future nor past, no time and space. It was all meaningless. We were in a state of purgatory. Our exhaustion made us trudge wearily, arms hanging at our sides, eyes grayed over and sockets purple from no sleep. Our lips stayed parted, and swollen tongues hung out. We dabbled and nibbled sporadically at the fungal tripe, not even feeling our hunger. A couple of us had already looked to be dead men walking. So quickly had this place absorbed us, sucking at our souls and left us shuffling carcasses. The noise of the swamp overwhelmed our senses and left us mute, with only the sluggish spiral of madness trapping us in our own brains. One of us dropped behind. I believe he just eventually laid down, giving in, and gone. We no longer knew which direction to walk. Had we moved forward? Had we just circled around over and over again? Were we to just eventually find ourselves stumbling back to the shore amidst our waiting companions we had left behind? Or would we, one by one, drop and sink, circling and circling, walking straight, trudging backwards, running even? Who was to know? Not us. Night came a third time. Only the third night. How could we have come to such a weakened state in so little time? But it had been the third night. Or the third month. There was no sane person to tell us. There were no rocks or trees to offer refuge for our limbs. We could only keep moving. To stop meant death. We spotted the shadow-form humanoid creatures again, their outlines marked in the moonlight. They were only maybe 100 yards away. I admit, my mind couldn't handle it anymore. Amidst the noises, the death, the fear, the being lost, I broke down. I wept quietly to myself as I staggered, feet still stomping so I wouldn't sink. The partitioner who had sent my arm, who at that point had stayed by my side since the commencement of the quest, shed tears of hopelessness as well. For what I can only guess was 2 days more and 2 nights more we walked without rest. We were at least 5, fittest of all. 'Twas the only reason we'd survived so long. By then the noise was no longer in our head, but in our bones, carved into the marrow. Exhaustion and madness had stopped our tears and talking. We each burrowed deep within ourselves, hiding from the reality around us. We wrapped layers and layers of scrambled thought and old memories around our minds like a child wrapping a blanket around himself to protect him from the night monsters. We were folded up, deep in our crevices, barely peeking out at reality. Our paces changed, and we wandered from each other. Some hours I had but the partitioner at my side, others I found myself alone, and then somehow we were back together again, stomping and walking to stay alive. On the 6th night in the Land of Hershel, I watched vacantly and half aware as one of the soldiers wandered off in the direction of the humanoid creatures that sluggishly moved in the distance. His arms had been up in either praise or greeting. Madness. Had he been aware of them? I don't know. I did know that they had been aware of him. Elric stopped his story and looked at the 4 knights around him, stopping his gaze on young Red. He much resembled you. Looked quite a lot like you. Gone just like that. Elric clapped his hands, and his gaze fuzzed over, blurring the terrified-looking young knight. Elric's gaze refocused and shifted to Timon, who hadn't touched his food in quite some time. It had grown cold and gray on his hands. The practitioner looked somewhat like you as well.
Quit terrifying us and continue with the story,
Piscus said with a shiver. His twin nodded, the carved stick in his hand forgotten. Elric leaned closer to the fire. There were 4 of us left, and in the state my mind was in, I hardly cared nor noticed. I had begun to see visions of home. Fields and cottages, streets and horses. I smelled flowers, and watched as a small girl ran up to me, holding her doll. I grabbed the doll and felt it in my hand. It was so real. The fabric rubbed between my fingers and questioned me at what existed. I no longer knew what authenticity was. Blurred insanity etched into the depths of my mind and kept me in false comfort. It became harder and harder to resurface into reality. When I did, it was pain, hunger, thirst, and fear. We were no longer knights and soldiers, but primal, fearful animals hiding in our mental burrows. I ask again, what are the traits of a true knight? Obedience? Why? Why were we walking? Why continue when there could be no end? Why keep your back straight when it's so easy to stop? And like I said before, we were no longer knights. Had another day passed? Had I brushed up against one of the humanoid creatures, its large white eye orbs gazing down? Oh gods, the noises of the swamp were inside me. They were now coming from me. I was mimicking the sounds, screeching out, moaning, and whispering. How many others made the noises themselves? Don't stop walking, or you'll sink. Had we lost another man to the black tentacles that occasionally slithered to the surface? Eat another fungal tripe. Stomp forward. Stay awake. Don't sink. Don't stop moving. Why were we out here again? Obedience? The ruins. Yes. Explore the ruins. Oh gods, don't sink. Hide back into the folds of my mind. I was at a party. I could taste the food, feel the heat from a handshake. Madness and lunacy. My imagination grew stronger than my reality. I was no longer in the swamp. I was elsewhere. Another land, another time. Days passed. Years, lifetimes were spent wandering the swamp. Mind hidden within itself. I was ancient. I was the noise that echoed out. I was the humanoid creatures. I grew into the fungal tripe. I was interweaving into the clammy wet fibers. I was the swamp. Then my foot struck rock. There was a silence in the camp as the knights leaned in toward Elric. The fire even seemed to go quiet. My head slowly raised, muscles and bones groaning like old hinges. My eyes blinked over and over, trying to comprehend why they saw something different. Where was the solid liquid that would take me into its embrace? I found myself standing on a large, flat, rectangular stone slab. Before me lay a huge square hole which no man could guess at, its depths made using massive stone bricks the size of wagons. I had reached the center of the swamp and found its mouth. The ruins! Finally, the ruins! My body didn't understand why I was no longer walking. What a strange feeling, this stillness. What was I supposed to do again? Something about the hole. The ruins. There. The stairs leading to the dark.
Was I to go in them? What was my quest? Why do this to myself? I turned away from the hole, looking back into the plains of the swamp. Sky and bog were the same color. Eternity. My eyes glazed over once more, and I faded into myself. Deeper and deeper, blurring reality and imagination. What was? What could be? What am? What is? I was no longer in the swamp, but somewhere else. Red stood, hands clenching and unclenching. So? He asked in hurried excitement and horror. What happened? Where were the other men that wandered with you? The partition, how did you break from the insanity? What was in the ruins? The other knights all nodded in unison, wanting answers. They looked forged. Elric licked his lips. They were so chapped. His mind couldn't remember. The story. What had been in the ruins? Blurred reality. Where was... the unsettling understanding. The coup de grace. Was this not authenticity? Was this grove not his false sanctum? How had he come to sit at this fire, to this forest, to this reality? This story had no beginning. It had no end. The ruins. That's right, he hadn't got in them yet. The mystery still remained. He had been right from the start. This storytelling grove was but a false split in the hair of the endless rope of life. This grove had no beginning. It had no end. The quest wasn't finished yet. There was more walking to do. An unknown journey that required more suffering. Why in life must we fight so hard for objectives we do not fully comprehend, all for the gain of another? Blind obedience. Elric understood then. Understood that he was but a pawn to an existence that marked him meaningless. And this fetid swamp he so resided in was both physical and metaphorical. It was not moot. It was solid certainty that bound him to waste away for naught. The swamp was him as it was all around him, for he allowed it to be so. The realization was too late. Young Knight Red faded away. Timon, still holding his tray of food, became nothing. Mattis stopped carving his stick and vanished. Piscus, with his strange accent, no longer existed. Elric no longer felt heat. The fire was gone. So was the forest. Where? Ah, yes, the swamp. The Land of Hershel. The only existence he would ever know. He could feel the noises of the swamp inside him once more, like chattering comfort. He cleared his eyes, finding himself sitting on a stone slab next to a massive opening in the ruins. He was alone. Elric stood, looking around at the landscape. He shivered, knowing that soon his mind would return back to its own depths. Another fireplace would appear, maybe different company to interact with. He turned and headed toward the staircase leading down to the dark belly of the swamp. His wary yet still obedient body took step after slow step downward, and Elric was lost to the Land of Hershel. That was In the Land of Hershel by Raphael Hoffman. Thank you all for listening. If you'd like to read the story yourself or listen to more of his work, then go to Raphael Hoffman's Wattpad account in the description. And like always, I'll see you all next time on Tales by the Fire.